Welcome to the Week 7 answer key video for Design 224 CAD Certification at Ivy Tech Community College. And in this video, we're going to be going through the last part of our last practice exam together. So this kind of marks the end of the prep part of our class. So hopefully you're watching this a couple days before the actual certification exam. So remember, we're just days away from the real certification exam here. So we're going to be working on part 2 of 2 of the Babcock Practice Exam, which is questions 10 through 19. So I'm going to walk you through the last part of our last practice exam so you can kind of see the answers to these final questions and how I would approach them. So remember that this references a series of files that you need to download and extract, and then you can use those to answer the questions. Let's go ahead and jump into it and work on our last several questions here for the semester. Okay, so they say open file CPE-28 page setup, so we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have that open. Assume that you print this drawing from model space using a color printer, and what color will objects drawn on the objects layer plot? Give the number only. Now this is a pretty tricky question. If you're not incredibly familiar with the way that things plot in AutoCAD. I have seen questions over this topic before, although they are somewhat rare. Okay, so I'm going to print this drawing from model space with a color printer, or assume that I'm going to. Okay, so I'm just going to choose PDF for right now because that would be color. But up here, if I go up here to my plot style table, this will control the way that an object prints. So different colors will cause a printer to print out different line weights or different colors. So the number that is up here for a color will ultimately determine how light or how dark it prints, and you can change the setting for different colors. So for instance, if I draw something red in model space, I could set it over here to be lighter or darker than something that I drew green. Now typically this is mostly used for black and white printers, but just because of what they're telling us here for this question, we're going to assume that we're printing it on a color printer. So if I look at the objects layer, you can also see in my layer manager here, my objects layer is going to print color 1. So that's one way you can find it. But then you can also see, okay, what does color 1 do? So it's kind of a two-part thing. My plot style for this layer is set on color 1, but then if I wanted to actually use that in real life for something, I would come in here to my plot style table or my pen assignments, and then I can say anything that's printed color 1, here is what happens to it. So again, this isn't typically used for color printers. Any place I've seen this used in real life in an actual setting, it's used for black and white printers. So it knows that a red line is printed more darkly or bolder than a green line or a blue line. And these are all custom settings that are done, for each particular firm or design company. But that's kind of what this is for and why they're asking you a question about this. But the answer to that most simply is 1. Okay, so a lot of work for a very basic answer, but that's where it comes from. Okay, open CPE-28 sheet size. So let's open that up, and they say, use appropriate inquiry demands to determine the answer to this question. What sheet size is layout 1 most likely designed to plot? Give the letter only. So remember, we're talking about an A size is 8.5 by 11, a B is 11 by 17, a C is 22 by 17. So remember that they double every time. So, or sorry, a C would be bigger than that. It would be 22 by 34, I believe. So let's open up our page here and we'll figure out what page size it's set up for. So CPE-28 sheet size. Okay, and we go to layout and they want to know what size paper this is set up for. So to figure that out, if I right click my layout tab here, I can go to my page setup manager. And here you see we have a 24 by 36. And if I go to modify, we can see here that my 24 by 36 sheet is set up for architectural D. So that's how you can figure out what paper size this is. And if I wanted to change it, I could just pick a different one in here. But your page setup manager for each layout tab controls what page size that particular layout is intended to print on. So this is a setup for a D page, basically. So again, I'm just going to say D here. So a very basic answer to a somewhat difficult question. All right, open CPE-29 adjust. Okay, move the polygonal viewport up so its top edge aligns with the top edge of the rectangular viewport, and the left edge of the upper portion of the polygonal viewport is 1/4 of an inch from the rectangular viewport as shown. What are the 2D coordinates of point A? So in other words, move this point so it's horizontally aligned and 1/4 inch from here, and then give them this coordinate. So pretty easy there, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to take this, use my move command, and actually, if I first draw a line on the end of here that's 0.25 long, now I can just move it all at once. So I'll just use my move command from here to here with my endpoint OSnap, do an ID command on this point, and I get 5.6807 and 3.1438. So that's basically testing your knowledge of the move command. And be careful on a question like this. I should have mentioned this. Make sure you're measuring this stuff in model space and that your viewports are always deactivated. So if you're not sure, you can type in P space and that will deactivate any viewports you have. But they like to trick you on the test with questions that will give you the wrong answer if your viewport is active. So if they say in layout or in paper space, make sure your viewports are deactivated. If they say in model space, then go over to your model tab and measure it there. So our answers for that one were 5.6807 and 3.1438. Moving right along, open CPE-29 scale. So let's open up our next file here. Okay, so we got a floor plan layout here with some stairs and a section view. And they say, add 1/4 inch equals a foot to the annotation scale of the existing dimensions, make the stair layout detail current, set the contents of the existing viewport to display at the scale of 1/4 inch equals a foot, don't make any other changes. Okay, so we've got some different layouts down here, but they want us to add the annotation of 1/4 inch equals a foot. So I'm going to pick my annotation scales here and choose that one. Okay, make sure your annotation menu is turned on here as well. Then I'm going to go to my stair detail. Okay, so I've got my stair detail pulled up, and they say make that layout current, which we did. Set the contents of the viewport to display at 1/4 inch equals a foot to match the annotation scale that we set. So I'm just going to double click inside this viewport, and I can see my scale right here is currently at 1/8, which is twice as small as I want. So I'm going to change that to 1/4. 1/4 inch equals a foot. And you can see when I do that, since my annotation scale matches my viewport scale, my dimensions magically show up. So back in the test, they say, what are the XY coordinates of point B in the layout, i.e. paper space? So here's an example of where they might trick you. Okay, so they want the coordinates of the endpoint of this extension line in paper space. So if I go back, notice how my viewport is active. So if I give the coordinates of that point right now, it's going to give me the model space coordinates. So let me show you. If I go to ID, and then I come down here and pick the endpoint of that line, notice how I get 28 feet, 10 and 1/8 inches, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so about 28 feet, 10 inches. Now if I deactivate this by typing in P space, and I do the same exact thing, notice now how I get 9 and 7/8 inches. So it's telling me that when the viewport is deactivated, it tells me the coordinates on this particular piece of paper. If the model space is active, then it tells me the coordinates of this point at 1:1 scale. So long story short, anytime they tell you layout space coordinates or paper space coordinates during the test, make sure your viewports are deactivated. You can activate them by double clicking inside of them. You can deactivate them by double clicking outside or typing P space. So if you are zoomed in like this, for instance, and you double click, my viewport is now active, but I can't get out of it because I can't click on the edges. This is where you can type in P space and deactivate that viewport and get out of there. So if you ever get stuck in a viewport, type in P space. But make sure you don't pan around in here either and change anything, because if I go in here and pan around, now when I take that measurement, it's going to be wrong. So don't change anything other than the scale, because it'll throw your answer off. Okay, so going up, they say enter your coordinates in fractional inches, leave off the inch marks, and use a backslash for any fractional measurements. So I'm going to say 9 7/8 was my x, and my y was 2 1/8. Okay, moving on. Question 5. To draw this isocircle, how should the isoplane represented by my cursor be oriented? Okay, so we have 4 options. So to switch to an isometric mode, if I want to draw a 2D representation of a 3D object like this, you need to turn on your polar tracking. So to do that, I'm just going to close this out and open up a new file from the AutoCAD template. And I want to show you how to turn on this polar tracking, or not polar tracking, but isometric snap. So I'm going to right click and go to OSnap settings, just so I can get into my drafting settings menu, and I'm going to go all the way to the left to snap and grid and turn on ISO snap. Okay, notice when I do that, I'm going to turn the grid off, my cursor changes. This is how I know I'm in isometric mode. And also, if I hit F5 on my keyboard, I can change the orientation of that cursor. So the reason that this is used is if I'm drawing an isometric box, for instance, let's switch to my correct angle here. Okay, so if I'm drawing an isometric box, maybe that's 12 by 12 by 12, and you don't have to draw the box here, actually. I just want to explain to you why this works. Okay, so I have an isometric box here, and remember this is just a 2D representation of a 3D object. So if I rotate around this thing, it's not really 3D, it just looks 3D, okay? So it's a way of faking a 3D drawing by doing 2D. So what you have to do on these drawings is draw in circles to make them look realistic, but you don't use the circle command because it doesn't come out right. So see how ridiculous that looks when I draw it. You have to use the ellipse command. So I'm going to go to axis end ellipse, and you have to use a special feature of the ellipse command called the isocircle. Now isocircles are made to show up correctly in an isometric drawing. So they're distorted properly so that they don't look goofy like this circle that I drew. But notice my isoplane on my cursor has to be oriented correctly to draw a circle on each face of this cube. So if I try to do the same command and come up on the top to draw that isocircle, up here it doesn't look right because it's the wrong isoplane. So if I hit F5, I can toggle that isoplane for whichever face of the cube I'm drawing on. Okay, so in this particular instance, you can see that this is the isoplane I would want, the top isoplane. So going back, that's some of the theory kind of behind this. It's a very easy question to answer if you know isometric drawing in AutoCAD. But to draw this isocircle right here, my cursor would match up to the box, which would be this one. Okay, so I would be drawing on my left isoplane there. So moving on, question 6, which can you do, or you can do which of the following with a named view? Select all that apply. Set a viewport to show the view, select to display that view in model space, select layers to apply to the view, or set the printer to print the view. So on this one, I'm going to say set a viewport to show the view, that's a yes. Select to display that view in model space, that's a yes. Select layers to apply to the view, no. Set the printer to print the view, yes. That's one of our printing options, remember. Okay, moving on, we're down to the last couple questions here. Open the file isometric.dwg. Set up the appropriate drafting modes for an isometric drawing. Draw a hole with a diameter of 3 on the top surface of the cube as shown. What are the XY coordinates of the quadrant point of A? Okay, so you have to know a little tiny bit about isometric drawing for this. So I'm going to close out the one that I did and open up this isometric file. and they say a diameter of 3, so we'll put it right in the middle. And the trick about an isometric drawing is to get into ISO mode. Remember, I came down here, right click, went to my settings, went to snap and grid, and turned on isometric snap. That's all you have to turn on. Hit OK. You'll know you're in ISO mode because your cursor will be, instead of 2 white lines, it will be a red line and a green line. That's how you know you're in ISO mode. Then you want to hit F5 on your keyboard to match your ISO mode up to the box. So there you can see my cursor matches up to the top of the box, so I can draw a circle in the top now. The other thing you need to do is set your polar tracking to 30, because isometric drawings are always increments of 30 degrees. They're either 30 degrees. Let's turn off the rectangular snap here. Mine is being wacko. I'm going to turn the snap off. There we go. Okay, so snap is off. So in an isometric drawing, notice I'm either at 30 degrees this way, 150 degrees this way, or straight up and down. So it's either 30 right here, 150 here, or straight up and down. So to find the center of this thing, I'm just going to draw a line from here to here, and a line from here to here, and that's going to tell me where the center of my circle should go. So remember, you have to go into your ellipse command up here, so I'm going to choose axis end ellipse, then choose I for iso circle, choose my center point, and then it's asking me for a radius down here, or I can put in a diameter. So I could either put in 1.5, or they told us a diameter of 3, so I could hit diameter and then 3, enter. And then they're asking me for the coordinates of this quadrant point right here. So let's make sure quadrant O snap is turned on, which mine is. So I'm going to go to ID, and notice it's not snapping onto that. It snaps onto these points over here. So the quadrant point for your circle isn't actually right here, it's down here. So to kind of get around that, you can just draw another isometric line out this way, and then do the ID command on that point, and say it's 11.15, 8.25. So there's not a ton of questions about isometric snap and isometric drawing. So if you're looking at a drawing like this and you're thinking, oh man, I've never done one of these before, I don't know if I'm ready for the test, nobody told me about this isometric drawing stuff. From the times I've taken the test, there's not very many isometric drawing questions. I want to say there's 1, maybe 2. You may be lucky to get 1 even. So it's not going to be a third of the test as isometric drawing. There may be 1 question about it on the whole test. So you're looking at 1, maybe 2 questions out of 35. So what I've shown you here is probably all you need to know to get an isometric drawing question correct. How do you turn it on and off? How do you change the ISO plane? How do you draw an ISO circle? That's pretty much it. So I'm going to key in my answer here, 11.15 and 8.25. Okay, we're down to our last 3 questions. Open CPE 25 attribute. So we'll go ahead and close this. And open this up. Okay, and it looks like there's nothing in here, but they've probably created a block that they're going to have us insert. So it says, yep, exactly. Insert the existing bush block into the drawing without exploding the block. Change the attribute mode from invisible to visible and change the text height to 12. How much does this plant cost? Okay, so we're going to insert this. So I'm going to go to insert, insert. Here's the bush. So we'll go ahead and drop it in here. Then if I double click it, notice it brings up my attributes for that particular plant. So it tells me $320. So you don't really have to do everything they tell you on here. Without exploding it, change it from invisible to visible, change the text height to 12. So what they really want you to do is go into the block attribute manager and change it in here from whether or not it's visible. Okay, but you don't really need to go through all that. So they want you to use the block attribute manager, but if you just double click it, you can see the attributes right there and you could change them. So $320 is the answer on that one, and that's kind of an easy way to get around that and kind of cheat and find the answer. So do not put in the $sign, so 320. Okay, moving on. Open the file CPE-20 area. Okay, so let's go ahead and open that up. And probably going to be finding the area of something based on the file name for this question. Okay, change both circles to have a radius of 0.375. Display the const layer. Stretch the left side of the polygon perpendicularly to the vertical construction line. What is the area of the polygon minus the circles? Okay, so I wouldn't waste my time really trying to resize these things. They said make them 0.375, so make life easy. Instead of trying to find some fancy way to modify them, let's just redraw them. So radius of 0.375, so I'm just going to say 0.375. Make sure you delete the right one. So I'm going to delete the original one, delete this, 0.375. Okay, so there we fixed those. I'm going to delete these little points right here. Since we're done, I'm going to get rid of these. I don't know what they're doing there, but I don't want to mess something up with them. Okay, then we need to turn on the construction layer, which if I go to my layer menu up here, I can just turn that on. And they say to stretch the left side of this over to here. So really you wouldn't necessarily have to use the stretch command on this, but I'll show you how to do it. You could just take this actually and move it over to here and take these lines and then lengthen them over to here. So if you don't know the stretch command, here's how you can still get the same answer. Okay, so if I delete that, delete this construction line, there you know you've moved it over to where it hits. So if I hatch this in, list, choose the hatch, the area is 17.7268. So that's the correct answer for this, kind of cheating an easier way. So if I undo here and go back to use the stretch command. So if I want to do it exactly the way they told me, here's how you can use the stretch command. So I'm going to pick stretch and choose the objects that I want to stretch. So I'm going to choose all these and I'm going to cross through the parts that need to stretch. Choose my base point, so I'm going to pick right here and then just stretch that straight over to right here. So the trick on this is you have to use a crossing selection window, the green selection window, when you make that initial choice. Now I can delete this, just to be safe, hatch that in, go to the list command and look it up. So there's two different ways you can move that thing around and make it the right shape and size. Okay, 17.7268. And then our very last question for the semester before we're ready to actually try the exam. Open CPE elevation.dwg. And if we can find the file here, there it is. So we'll open that up. So we have an elevation of a house. Okay, so looking at the question, what is the square footage of the brick area? Remember, give the answer in the same precision as the answer AutoCAD gives you. So they have it hatched in already. So I'm going to go back to the Model tab, choose that hatch pattern, go to List, and the area is 292.6597. Okay, so we're going to put that in. So very easy question if you know the list command. 292.6597. So we can go ahead and save all those and submit. Okay, so that's our last practice exam for this semester. So at this point, we've gone through several different practice exams, all types of different questions. So I hope that all these exams we've worked through together and in various pieces has prepared you for the actual certification exam. So I know that I'm going to be taking the newest version at some point to update my AutoCAD certification. So I think this practice is good for me as well as for you. But I hope that by going through all these, you've learned something and you feel confident that you're ready to take the actual exam. So that's it for our week 7 answer key video, the last part of our last practice exam. So go through this now on your own and correct any of the ones that you missed or you had trouble with, and you should be ready to go for the actual practice exam then. So Good luck, and I'll see you in a couple days for the actual test.